Well, thank you for having me, and I've been wanting to come to BioCom for a couple of years now. I want to take you back out of the desert now, back into the clinical studio. The key word in this title is assist, and I want to actually get to the point eventually, and I'll tell you, it's not like when you read a book, you always want to know who done it or what the end point is. I'm going to tell you the end point now, because I want you to hold on to this. This is a discussion of a project, or not really a project, it's a clinical work that we do that sort of has just evolved from the normal medical photography documentation and reporting to something that has become integral to the patient care. And it was, for me, it's exciting and encouraging that something could evolve into that. And other things can evolve into that area in everything we do. That photography, which we're all involved in, is not just documenting something, but it can be a help to other people. And the message is about communication and being adaptable and seeing potential in what we do. So in many ways, I'm the new kid on the block. I just spoke to Tom, who's been at his 40th BCA conference, and this is my first, but I've only been a medical photographer for 9 years now, and for the majority of that time I've worked at the Children's Hospital at Westmead, and it's probably the larger of the two children's hospitals in Sydney. We have two children's hospitals. The other is at Randwick, and you all know about Bondi Beach. Well, Randwick's near Bondi Beach, but we're out in the west, in the suburbs, and it's probably the more heavily densely populated area. So we're quite a big facility. It's a busy place. This is it's from the helipad showing our complex, and it was really modern 20 years ago, and now it's looking a little dated, but it's actually going to be redesigned soon. A children's hospital, all hospitals, are full of caring staff, and it's just a privilege to work with some of the people who dedicate themselves to working with kids. This is our foyer. It's not a very good shot. It was just grabbed on the last day that I was there. But it's a busy place. That's our hospital mascot, is the bandage bear, and he appears on everything. Some background about myself. With my short career in medical photography, before I worked as a veterinarian for approximately 30 years. I owned a single-man practice for 12 years, and it was a mixed practice. I saw horses and cattle, but I mostly saw dogs and cats, and then I got interested in birds. And it became a bit of an avian practice. And I only mention this because there is a bit of a connection anatomically between birds and what I'm going to talk about, the Pectus Carinatum condition. So when I pretty much got burned out as a vet, single-man practice for 12 years, 24/7, on call all the time, I thought it would be nice to go into something else. I sold my practice, did a diploma of photography, and then wanted to stick with the biological theme, and I was lucky enough to be involved in to actually volunteer and do some work in a hospital. But during the time I was transitioning, I got to photograph my patients in a more sort of fascinated way by the photography. And with the bird patients, I sort of got interested in the avian eye and just the differences between the genders of birds, the female up top and the male down below. They're gang cockatoos, and this is our Australian Eclectus parrot, female up top, male down below, and the satin bowerbird, female up top, male down below. Just the periorbital regions and feathering were so much different, and I just found intrigued by that. And there were other cool subjects that came along, like twin cockatoos, which obviously died, but very close to hatching, and that's a very rare condition in cockatoos. So I thought it was a natural fit to look into medical photography when I was doing this photography diploma, and I was persistent enough, I think, and got this volunteer job in a medical illustration unit, and then I did a locum for my now colleague at Westmead, And now I have a new career, and I just love it. I'm really enjoying this career. So, but back to the subject at hand, my topic is Pectus Carinatum, and the discussion of how photography is used in our hospital with particular reference to this condition. And here is a breakdown of how I'd like to handle this topic. I'd like to see what is Pectus Carinatum, who does it affect and why, how is it treated or managed at our hospital, what do we do with the photography, how do we do the photography with it, then a broader look about how the photography is used to have an impact, and some concluding remarks that I'd like to draw widely about how it might concern all of us. So what is Pectus Carinatum first? Well, the word pectus obviously refers to the pectoral region, the front of the chest, the sternum area. Carinatum is a really interesting term because if you just allow me to digress a little back into the avian world, in human anatomy, the carina refers to the cartilage part of the trachea, where it bifurcates and forms two bronchi. But in the zoological terminology, the carina refers to the sternum of a bird, and the sternum is where the muscles insert, the pectoral muscles insert onto the bird. So, as I said earlier, here's a temptation for avian anatomy. You can see the sternal area here, and if I just move to the next slide, in the same textbook, this sternum is broken down into different parts, but one of the parts of the sternum is called the carina, which is the big plate in front of the bird. You'll know this if you eat chicken. I don't, but you'll know that that's the breastbone, and it's quite prominent. It's prominent because birds fly, and their equivalent of our arms are moving all the time and doing a lot of work to fly. So it's an insertion point for muscles. While I was travelling last week, I sat for an hour at a bush or a plant in Northern California, Redwood area, and you could hear the hummers. It was fantastic, and I got to take a couple of photographs of this. The hummingbird is, as you know, is the smallest of all birds. It can weigh down, in the Cuban hummingbird, apparently weighs 2 grams. Now 2 grams is like 2 grams. That's like half a teaspoon of sugar. But these ones in California are obviously a bit bigger, but they're still very, very small. And you know about the hummingbird that they can just be still in flight, and they can just hover over an open flower and drink the nectar, or they can grab an insect from a branch, and they can also fly backwards and pull out of that area there. So they are amazing birds that they are able to just stay in one position. But it all depends on the muscles that they have and the control that they have. So if you look at a hummingbird's skeleton, you can see the carina, by proportion to the rest of its body, is huge. Now, I want to contrast that with another bird. And I don't mind that this is out of focus, because I really don't like this bird. I shouldn't say that, but I do. I can tell you a story, but I won't because it'll take up time. But one of these birds nearly killed me one time, and it was really scary. I saw this bird in a backyard in the same week I took the hummingbird shot in Northern California. So there you go. You are multicultural here. The emu, or emu, as you would say, is that right? Is a flightless bird from Australia. There are flightless birds all around the world. There's the ostrich and the emu So when we look at the skeletons of the hummingbird and the emu, you can see their carina there and there. You can appreciate the difference. Sorry, these are just internet photos, but you can see the difference. That's flat. There's the ribs insert here, and there's just nothing here. Whereas the ribs insert here, and there's all this area here. So obviously, emus have no need for a large carina. That's probably stating the obvious. it fooled me one time when I had to, and this is part of the story, and I'm not going to go through the end of the story, but I had to actually anaesthetize an emu, and its wing is that big, and I hadn't really, and I was an ostrich vet at that time. I was treating ostriches, and who've got huge wings, and anyway, it really surprised me that the emu has such a little wing. So I want to get back to our human patients. Another textbook photo, just avoid the middle one at the moment, but you can see that Pectus Carinatum has this increase in the chest wall at either the front or the side, but it's usually around the front, compared to a normal chest wall. That's schematically what Pectus Carinatum does. Here's another textbook photo of a young man with the condition, and you can see the photographer here has used really extreme shadow lighting with a large lighting ratio to highlight the protuberance of the chest. And I just wanted to show you the subscript of that. It says in this textbook, 14-year-old boy with keeled chest. Now, in a sense, there's two messages here. 14-year-old boy is the sort of typical cohort of patients that we see with this. Boys are so much more affected than girls, and which is opposite to the case when it comes to scoliosis, as you would know. And keeled chest is their description, and it's often given that description related to the bird. The bird's keel bone, which is the carina, is where the connection of the keel chest comes from. Now, this can be taken to an improper extreme, I think, because in that same textbook is this photograph, is this drawing, which is not very nice, really. I was quite shocked when I saw that. It's actually like if I was that 14-year-old boy looking through a medical textbook, as you might do if you're in a library, and you see a depiction of your condition like this, I think it's a bit demeaning. But in the same textbook, it says this: try to avoid using expressions such as pigeon chest, chicken breast when talking to patients or parents. But the boy is labelled with the condition of keel chest. Anyway, I just think it brings out the message that we need to be careful and sensitive when we're talking to patients or about patients with these conditions, and liking their condition to an animal's anatomy, I think, is probably a little bit demeaning. That was just a hobby horse saying that. I just wanted to contrast the pectus, the other type of pectus. It's Pectus excavatum, and that is where it's like a sunken-in chest, and that does have quite an effect on the. This is another textbook photograph of a lad with Pectus excavatum, and with this condition there is. Just going back for a second, you can see that there is much more pressure on the heart here. With Pectus carinatum, it's not a life-threatening condition. It's not a condition where there's pressure on the heart or there's decompression of the chest. But with excavatum, there is, and surgery is often required for that. It's interesting that the other day, or prior to coming to America, I met somebody, and they were telling me about their 78-year-old brother, who, when he was 19, had this condition, and he had a surgery which removed this part of the sternum, and then they reversed it, and so it actually made it a little bit carinatum instead of excavatum, and that was, so he was 78, and he had that done, when he was 19. So that's what they did for surgery 50 years ago. I think these days they are doing appliances and orthopedic appliances to try and keep that chest straight. So back to our condition. Sorry, that was a huge digression. How is Pectus Carinatum managed? Well, it's managed with a brace, conservatively. There is surgery for it, but generally there is some conservative managements with braces. This is another textbook shot, and this is probably the end of my textbook shot, so I'm sorry about that. But you can see that they're attached with Velcro strips, and there's pressure put onto the brace there. In our facility, we're not dealing with the orthopedic surgeons, we're dealing with an orthotist. And a cast is made of the patient's chest. There's a steel bar here, and some bending tools. And this is our orthotist, and he's actually fashioning a brace based on this cast made of the chest. And as we go on, just a further step, and you'll see this is the finished brace from the typical brace. There are some Velcro strips here to adjust. There's two thermocast plastic things which are impacting on the area where it is actually pushing out. There's a steel bar here, and there's these straps, ratchet release things here, and of course the ever-present cable tie, which are very handy little things. And here is the brace from the side, just put on there, and you can see it's totally adjustable. So, and the brace is worn. They might have a singlet on or whatever, but the brace is generally worn there, but it's usually covered with a shirt or whatever. So, what are the treatment options and what are some of the problems? The patients are given a pretty subtle ultimatum. Subtle, I mean, maybe not so subtle. Wear the brace and see an improvement. Don't wear the brace and you probably won't improve. Or if you put it off for now, you may not improve either because you've missed the peak time where it's going to work. So the problems mainly from that are centered around the compliance with the device. It's a bit uncomfortable, but most of the kids say it gets better. There may be some pain associated with it, but the big problem seems to be the actual stigma and the actual, I mean, what 14-year-old boy wants to wear a brace to school? Even though it's covered, they can still probably see it. So you can see initially there's a problem with compliance. And there's not many other treatment options. There may be some surgery, but most go for this conservative treatment. Peer pressure is a very big thing in the teenager, the adolescent. Female patients are a bit more problematic, and they get it. We have had over the 5 years approximately 195 to 100 patients, and we've had 6 girls in that group, or 6 girls that we've seen. Maybe there's a female orthotist as well, and maybe they don't come up for photography, but generally they do, and they're photographed in a bra or a top. So the photography, I'd like to tell you about our workflow. It's pretty straightforward. We photograph the patients in still photography and then 3D imaging as well. So it's a studio. This is a young man who's consented, and his father's consented here. And we photograph them in the studio. We use a Nikon D3S, and we use monoblock studio flashes, Bowens, and we use this coloured paper for. I know a lot of people use white, but that's what we use for all our patients. In this case, with Pectus photography, we use a 3:1 lighting ratio. We consistently use an aperture of f11, and we use pocket wizards to control the lighting, and a 105 micro lens. And we photograph from the chin to the navel, basically. So they're de-identified in the photos. The patients, as I said, they're primarily boys. It's photographed with a shirt off, and that's the field of view. That's the sort of a series that we take. And I'll talk about this later, but you can see that mark that the brace is made on the chest. There's a sequence that we do, laterals, obliques, AP, the other oblique and the other lateral. For the first visit, we photograph them in 3 sets of those. We photograph them with the brace on, either shirt on. They're not too worried about whether the shirt's on or off, but the orthotist just likes to make sure that he knows and can recall what sort of brace has been put on and where the brace fits. There's a photograph with the arms down. The photos are taken on expiration, so that it doesn't show the pectus as much as when they're breathing in, but it's a standardization, so we can get an idea of. So I always make sure that the patient's breathing out as we take the photo, and then we photograph them with their hands on their heads. So, and you can see that, as I said, the brace has caused this red mark, which doesn't last for very long after it's taken off. It's just an impact mark. But that's really handy for the orthotist because he can actually see where the point of contact is. The oblique view, I think, carries a dramatic effect of what the pectus is doing, especially with a bit of a lighting ratio going on. And yeah, you can sort of see it close up there. We use 3D imaging, and we find 3D imaging. We have a 3D camera, which it's been great to have. It's not set up for pectus patients, but it's set up for craniofacial use. But it's very handy, and it's a 3D MD system. That's our system. The patients stand in this cube frame, and we have 5 camera pods and flashes, and the computer is behind the shot here. And sometimes I'll have to stand on blocks because we want to get from their clavicle to their navel in the shot. Just a close-up of that. They can look at themselves in these 5 views here. That each view of that represents each camera. It's been a really handy tool, and I can tell you why a bit later. But that's the sort of image we get. You can see it's not perfect for upper torso. Apparently, the references I was reading, the main use of the main 3D camera was actually a tailor. It's not tailored to fit, but it was actually from tailor usage, from making suits for people and clothes for people. I was blown away by that because it's quite an expensive piece of equipment. But you can have a 3D setup to do a whole body, but as I said, ours is just set up for faces and heads. But so we don't see the arms, and we get these little patches here. But it does show us the areas of interest. So we can see it in all views. So we can see a lateral there. We can see the AP. And very handy, looking from the navel up. There's the chin. We can see the rise in the chest wall there. And what's even more handy is you can turn that skin off and turn it to a texture, so it looks more like a sculpture. And that's quite handy too. And it also depersonalizes it a little bit for the patients when they're looking at it. We can do a before and after, and this is where it's really, really handy. The photo before is when Angus first came to us for photography. You can see the rise there, and this is when this was his last visit, and so see how flat it's going. So he's going really well. And I've got a little video, and you'll see that it's taken quite a while. So we can see these together. I won't say much about 3D measurement because it's actually just new to us. There was someone who asked for a research paper about it. It's really difficult because we can't really get the landmarks properly. And my colleague Paul has spent a lot of time with this, and it's just difficult to quantify. And it's really not outside the purpose of what it's being used for at the moment. When you do put the first and last images in, you end up with something like this. It means it sort of doesn't really mean a lot, but that beigey area is the area of difference between the 15 months that this child has been wearing the brace. And that represents 35 cubic centimetres. But that's the extent of where we can measure it. So we don't go very big on this tool. We don't try and quantitate it. The whole thing is about letting the patient see, probably as per the image before, we show them the differences. And that's key to what I was going to say later on. And the critical section, how is the photography used? Here is the critical section for what we do. The crux of what I'd like to tell you today is that photography is not only used to demonstrate changes to the clinical staff, but it's actually for the patient to visualise themselves and see that the brace is working. And when they see that the brace is working, they're much more ready to comply with the device. And we make an effort for each of the patients to, when they come, we have these pages printed for them, and they can actually look at them, they can look at the images, before and after, and they can sort of see. And it's all about persuading them that it's a really good idea to wear the brace. When we first started with this project, we just thought, we just do it to see whether the orthotist was actually on track in what he was doing, and that's what he asked us to do, the reason to do it for. But it's morphed and evolved into this assistance with patient outcomes, and that's what I'm excited about. This is my colleague Paul. He's demonstrating the image on the screen, and then we can actually line up the images. We put them in an oblique to get an idea. This is looking from the head down, as if you're just looking down this way, and we can see that bump there has really flattened out. So it's sort of it's an encouragement for them, but not just an encouragement. It's sort of just saying, yes, you're on track. Keep wearing the brace, and the orthotist just keeps reinforcing that. I asked these two, the father and son, if they wouldn't mind going through an interview, and like any teenage boy, you'll see that Angus says nothing. So I wasn't asked for a lot for him, but Jeff, his father, does sort of sum it up pretty well. Jeff, I'm just wondering, can you just give us a brief summary of your journey so far with Angus and the Pectus?
So yeah, Angus's Pectus was quite pronounced, which a lot of people might think is just sort of, it's just cosmetic, but I guess for somebody his age growing up, it really did sort of play on his mind, and was worried about going swimming and things like that. So he saw a specialist, and we came down here, and yeah, so far it's been a pretty long journey, but I think it's been well worthwhile, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think I dug out the photos, and here's the 2015, March 2015
yes.
Set of prints, and you can, probably see on the other slides, but there's quite a prominence there, isn't it? And
very much so.
Last November is quite a different story.
Yeah. So it really has sort of made a huge difference.
Yeah, and I know you touched on this, but you drive 500 kilometres,
yes.
and for our American friends, 300 miles.
Yes.
And 6 to 7 hours.
Yeah.
You're from the country up north,
yes.
of Sydney. Is it worth your while to come down?
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's nowhere else that you could come to have this sort of service. And at his age, it has to be done now. So if we were to wait, a few years, because he's developing now, if we waited another sort of 5 years, you wouldn't be able to wear a brace and actually get the same result. You'd be looking at surgery, and I think it's definitely worth sort of doing it this way.
Yeah. Oh, well done. And just finally, we do the photographs and we show you the photos. Do they help you, or do they help you, Angus? Do you think to feel like you want to persevere with your treatment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've seen a big difference sort of from day one. If you look at your photos, and you can see it really sticking out. And I think when he sort of sees the photos and the encouragement that we've had here, it really does make him want to wear the brace, because there was a short period where he just didn't want to wear it, and we were trying, and you can't force him, but he's taken ownership, and I think that's just because he has seen really good results in the photographs. So,
Angus, is it uncomfortable to wear, or do you think it's different from other kids?
Sometimes it can get a little uncomfortable. Most of the time it's comfortable.
Yeah. Be easier to say, just I don't want to do it today, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
But generally, he's pretty good with it.
Yeah, that's good. Well, you've come a long way, and we've been seeing you for 2 years, and it's been it's been a pleasure for us to see you improve so much.
Great.
So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
It is a really, I think, an exciting thing to see that part of the treatment is actually the photography. And I know, those who have been involved in melanoma survey work and all that sort of thing, it's life-saving, isn't it? I mean, I remember our past president of IAMBI, who is works in a cancer clinic and does a lot of skin work. He has said on a number of occasions. Well, I remember telling one story about how he photographed something which became a diagnosis for the patient and pretty much saved their life from melanoma. So at an early stage. So yeah, there's some exciting parts of medical photography that that we can inject into patient care, and I think that to me is exciting. So just to go with a couple of concluding remarks, I'd just like us all to often see the bigger picture when we are at work, in our own places and offices and sitting behind a computer. Remember that many employed medical positions in this industry, we're more than just technicians. We're actually there offering a patient care service, and there is a role to play in patient outcomes. We just have to look for them and be available. And the key, I think, is liaison with medical staff, and we can pride ourselves on our equipment and our skill in our workplace, but you know, we need to have a passion and for dealing with people as well. And I think in a hospital situation, that's sort of almost a given. I have worked in a hospital where the medical photography department was very remote, but they weren't only remote physically, they were remote. They regarded the doctors as the enemy almost, and maybe that's extreme, but it's sort of sad when that happens. So I just think we need to liaise in our workforce. So I think it's important to be able to sustain ourselves in our job, and that's sort of how we're doing it. We're going to be replaced by iPhones pretty easily, I think, if it's just purely the technical reason that we're there. But I think if we can become involved in a structure with a particular clinic or with a department, then that will help save the profession. I mean, our IAMB chapter is really diminishing, and it's very sad. And I've talked to some BCA people here, and I think similar things happening. So that's all I really wanted to say about that. I'd just like to acknowledge the people I work with, the orthotist, Paul, my fellow photographer, David Fitzsimmons. He's a speech pathologist, but he really helped cementing my thoughts. Thank you so much to BCA and the Endowment Fund for Education, because they were very generous for me to come here, so that was very nice.